So, Jay, thank you for taking time to talk about your new film that's now out for folks to view, Craving. I appreciate it. So, how's your day going so far?
It's going pretty good. I was just made a Facebook post earlier. I'm an anxious individual. Like I have anxiety issues, and I've
Mm.
just recently started a new medication for it, which is doing real well. If that's not TMI.
Oh, people love that stuff, right? Glad it's working out for you, and looks like Craving is working out for you. I've been seeing a lot of buzz on it, and I finally got a chance to see it myself. And if you wouldn't mind, I always like to get in their own words, the director, here, let my viewers know a little bit about what Craving's about.
Okay. Well, Craving is a crime thriller slash horror movie, and I lead with the crime thriller thing because we kind of sell it as a monster movie, but there really is a strong crime thriller element, which
Mhm.
runs how over half the running time of the movie,
Sure.
before it really gets into the monster stuff. So it's about some like heroin addicts who end up besieged in this bar, a rural bar, and there's mysterious figures outside, that want something from them, and the secret that one of the addicts is carrying turns out to carry the horror element into it. It was inspired partially by a little bit from Dust Till Dawn. Like I really liked '90s like horror thriller stuff.
Mhm.
Like I really like when you take people like criminals, people that live outside of societal boundaries, and then you put them in a situation where they can't count on those societal boundaries to help them. Like I like that, and plus, there's just something cool about seeing like badasses having to deal with something that's more badass than them. You know? Like
I always like those types of stories too, where the criminals, they're bad, but then they run into the worst.
exactly, yeah, exactly. And there's, I am a complete straight arrow, but like there's a romance to fictional crime, to
Mhm.
fictional criminals, that I also empathize with.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's well, especially with these criminals because they are addicts, all of them. They have issues themselves, and seeing them deal with that, plus deal with the situation in the bar, plus deal with the folks outside the bar, and the fact there's that dark secret. You got a lot of components to juggle there.
Totally, totally. And one of the major themes running through this movie and a lot of my movies is like found family. And
Mhm.
how, people say blood's thicker than water, but I find that not to necessarily be true. Like I think some of the strongest bonds are the family and friends that we make along the path of life as opposed to just our blood relatives. So like I think that's a theme that I like to play with a lot.
Yeah, there was a bit of the feeling of family in this dynamic of these addicts. I mean, you kind of have the mom figure
Hmm.
who's not just the mom to the one gentleman. I'm sorry, I forgot the
That's
name
okay. His
slipped
name
off
was
it.
Will.
Will, thank you.
Hmm.
Um, you had that dynamic, but then she also seemed to be kind of like the mother figure to the whole group. Uh
Totally.
and then the person who had her back, you've got
Hmm.
that guy, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah, yeah.
you
Mac, yeah.
back, and then you have a few other elements which
Yeah, totally. And
we'll
it's a lot of characters, so I feel bad for not having the names because like, it's a big cast, like, that was definitely a huge challenge. I like working with ensembles,
Mhm.
this is probably the biggest ensemble I've ever worked with on, something like this, but I like different dynamics between characters, and I like
Mhm.
multiple dynamics, and it's just something I enjoy, like, like a not to compare myself to Robert Altman, but like I like the old Altman films, where it was like tableau and it was like so many different characters like coming in and out and interacting with each other. Like I like that, so and I like to see that kind of thing in like
Mhm.
a low budget like horror milieu. I think that's cool.
Well, I think you juggle it well, but it must be also because of, I would say in part because of the talent that you have in front of the camera. They seem to handle it well. You've got a number of folks in here, not just Felissa Rose in here, but Gregory Blair you have in here. You have some other experienced actors in that. How long was it for casting this film?
It wasn't really very long.
Hmm.
So, I cast a few people prior to launching the crowdfunder for it. We crowdfunded about $64,000 for the movie in the initial
Sure.
run, and then another five for a post. But so I had cast, I think, Kevin Caliber and Ashley Undercuffler
Mhm.
and maybe Rachel Amanda Bryant, like straight out, and Gregory Blair was on early.
Mhm.
I think it was just those four, and then we did auditions pretty soon after the crowdfunder, and I think it all came together casting wise in 2 or 3 weeks probably. Although there were a couple of snags. We
Sure.
initially cast a different actor as Will,
Okay.
and I honestly thank God it worked out how it did. But like that created a thing, and we had a little bit of trouble finding the young Will and
Okay. Yeah.
uh, and
Mhm.
and the mom. For some reason, on our casting notices when they went out, we just didn't get a ton of submissions for those two roles, and but we kept looking, and we ended up with good people, but it was a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and they all seem to play off each other well. Kind of as the new kids say. I'm an old guy. What can I say? But they say they understood the assignment. Everybody seemed to be on board with the film because one of the things I noticed with it was the approach was you seem to give the material a more serious tone for most of the film
Yeah.
than someone might expect for a movie of this type. Though you do add a little bit of camp near the end when the big secret is revealed. Was that on purpose? So, what was your approach to that?
Yeah, so generally speaking,
Hmm.
when I'm attacking tone on a movie, generally speaking, I go for a more grounded approach,
Hmm.
like throughout.
Sure.
So like, characters, reacting in real ways and relating with each other in real ways. I'm real big on, like human emotion and pathos. So like, some people might even say this veers a little like far into melodrama, but like that's the kind of thing that I really like.
Hmm.
And then when it comes to like horror gore, and this movie does take a sharp left turn in the third act,
Hmm.
like I like I like gore and horror that's not just like scary, but it also has like a fun
Hmm.
element to it. Like I like
Sure.
Peter Jackson horror as
Yeah.
opposed to say like like Saw or something like that. And I like Saw just fine, but as a filmmaker, I would have no
Sure.
interest in making that like dour,
Hmm.
like serious, toned for the horror
Right.
part of it. You know, and I tried, to keep it all, kind of in the same universe stylistically, but it got a little crazy at the end.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, for a film like this, it's kind of what you expect, though, and I like that payoff because it's a creature feature,
totally.
but you've got to kind of wait a bit for the big moments that you're kind of waiting for. But when you do, you do pay off, especially your practical effects.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm telling you, for indie films, I've watched a lot of indie films over the years since I
Yeah, yeah,
started covering them, and I was very impressed by not just the creature design in that, but even the smaller makeup effects in that. Had
yeah.
you worked with these individuals before? Did you kind of know who you
Yeah.
wanted to work with?
Yeah, absolutely. So Robert Bravo is the chief special effects artist. He's honestly
Mhm.
like he had a little bit of help from our regular makeup artist,
Mhm.
but for the most part, he was a one man band on this
Sure.
show, and he also acted as a producer. So I've known Bravo for his name's Robert Bravo, but he goes by
Mhm.
Bravo.
Sure.
I've known him for, oh man, I think I met him in 2007 or eight. Like
Mm.
I had just
Mhm.
finished my zombie movie Edges of Darkness, and we were working at Starbucks together, and just talking about movies and stuff, and
Sure.
initially like he always wanted to be an effects artist, but initially I just thought he had a good mind for to be a producer. So
Sure.
I had him come on and produce a couple of low budget movies for me, Trap, and then we worked on Monsters in the Woods. And on
Mhm.
Monsters in the Woods, he started moving more into the special effects. And then after Monsters in the Woods, like he got really, really focused on effects. So for like the next whatever 10 years, he was
Mhm.
primarily a special effects artist. And then on Craving, I brought him back in as a producer and the special effects artist. But
Well,
yeah.
well, yeah, they looked great. I love the
Oh,
creature
totally.
design. Got a little feel there too, of the American Werewolf in London
Oh yeah.
sort
Yeah, yeah.
of
Totally.
feel.
Yep, American Werewolf or The Howling, I thought
For the
about a
Howling.
lot because,
Mhm.
like, one of my things on this, and I was concerned going into it because, like I said, the
Yeah.
horror stuff really kicks in that third act. So I was like, it's kind of slow burny, and I was like, I was a little bit worried about it not paying off things earlier. But I started looking again at American Werewolf in London and The Howling, especially The Howling, like
Mhm.
like that it's pretty
Yeah.
much like structurally very similar. You have a pretty much like a thriller drama for about an hour, and then you have the werewolf stuff, you know. And American Werewolf in London is peppered a little bit more throughout, but it's similar,
Mhm.
like it doesn't really go out until the transformation through the end. So I definitely took inspiration from those.
Yeah, I really liked how the transformation played out as well as the creative lighting and cutting because I think some people don't realize how important that is for when you're doing special effects.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, luckily, like for me, and what's allowed me to make so many movies is, I
Mhm.
am an editor, and
Mhm.
so I am post is expensive, so
Right.
like I'm able on a movie like this, I can take over post and basically do it for free,
Sure.
and do most of the editing. And then as far as like the lighting and stuff, we just got like really super lucky with our DP, Sophia Casciola, and her husband Michael Epstein was our gaffer, and then they had one other person on their team. It was a three-person
Wow.
camera team, and we shot 2 cameras most of the time. So it was
Mhm.
always like, their third guy who was acting as like swing, second AC, whatever,
Sure.
whatever. And, so like he's running around moving lights, Michael's running around moving lights. He has a camera in one hand and a light in the other. And I mean, like if you would look at some of the behind the scenes stuff, like it looks kind of chintzy behind the camera, 'cause it's like it's literally,
Mhm.
as far as like crew on deck, we had, the three-person camera team, a one-person sound team, and a makeup person. And like,
Wow.
and then and a lot of
Mhm.
the producers were acting in the movie, Bravo was doing special effects. So like there was more people in front of the camera than behind the camera.
It,
Definitely.
it sounds like a true indie production. Everybody wears the multiple hats, right?
100%. But and what made us get so lucky, like with Sophie and Michael, is they were able to maintain this quality level
Mhm.
that it honestly blows me away, especially for the time that we had. We
Sure.
shot all of that bar stuff in 6 days, I think,
Wow.
maybe seven, but six,
Wow.
including most of the monster stuff.
Right.
There's a few pickups of the monster, which we actually
Mhm.
did in our backyard in Canoga Park. Um,
Nice.
but because one thing when you're doing a movie like this, you can't really like if we were to do the full on transformation and some of those full on like head
Yeah.
rippings and stuff like that would take and does and did take hours to do.
Mhm.
So when you're on a set and you're paying for the soundstage and you're paying for all the actors and the crew, like if we would have stopped and done that, we would have been another probably 4 days on the stage.
Mm.
Whereas like, okay, we can go back into our backyard, use a backdrop, light it the same. And I was actually amazed at how well the shots matched. Like I can hardly tell. And I was there. I know what shots are what. But like, Sophie and Michael did a really,
Mhm.
really good job at that. And it all fit together,
So
and made the schedule doable.
yeah, and it definitely works. So was the bar an actual bar or did you build that?
We built it. So
Wow. Okay.
so one of the and I'll be like straight up and honest. I think one
Sure.
of the production mistakes, the initial production mistakes I made is I chose to shoot in Los Angeles.
Ah.
And for anybody that lives in LA, they know locations are more expensive, permits are more
Mhm.
expensive. There's a lot of expenses out there that I wouldn't have had if I would have stayed home in Georgia or took it
Mhm.
to Ohio or Louisiana or something like that. So we moved to LA, or the decision was made to shoot in LA. So I go out there to start looking at locations, and at first I was like, maybe we'll find a real bar that would
Mhm.
work because it's COVID. It was like we were
Right.
starting to come out of it, but there's a lot of places that had shut down, and I thought maybe we'd be able to pick up a place like at least for a month or two and do it, but just nothing within the price range.
Sure.
So we ended up, I talked to my production designer about actually building it and what she could actually build it for if we found a reasonable stage. And, so she gave me a figure, and I was like, okay, we could make that work if we can find a stage
Right.
to rent for under a certain amount. And luckily I did. It took me about a month to find, but once I found it, we rented the stage, we went in, we pretty much owned the stage. And the cool thing about the stage thing is, you have a shower on site,
Mhm.
you have holding for the people. So it's like it just but there was a slight scare where we were going to move it to a real restaurant in Venice Beach. And it
Mm.
was like I don't know if you've ever been to Venice Beach, but it's like one block from the actual beach. So
Sure.
it's like noise like crazy, really thin
Mhm.
walls. The homeless were right outside, like screaming most of the time, and we almost took that. But anyway, we did the stage, and then Holly Rockwell, our production designer, built the bar, and did a
Wow.
really good job. And it's surprisingly affordable. Like it honestly worked out to be cheaper to rent the stage and build the bar than it would have been to actually rent a real bar. And then and then the
Sure.
problems with renting a real bar, especially if they're
Yeah.
still operating, is you're working around their business hours, or
Mhm.
like if you're doing gore stuff. And we shot a lot of this movie in continuity, like in order.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
like as we're doing that, the blood stuff, which took I think 3 days, and
Mhm.
we don't have to clean up. Like we can just
Right.
we can stop wherever we stop, and then
Sure.
the next day we come in and we pick up right there. Whereas if we were on a real working bar, we would have to clean it like spick and span, which takes. I mean, oh man, when we finally did clean up that place, it took us. And here I'm, the director and the
Yeah.
producer. It
Yeah.
was pretty much me and Robert Bravo, with sponges, and it took us. I want to say a day and a half because it took
Wow.
we thought it would take a few hours, but it took us
Sure,
an
sure.
entire full day and then maybe two other like little quarter days to get
Well
everything. I mean,
well,
there
it
was blood everywhere. I mean, we found blood in the ceiling. We had these like 10-foot,
yeah.
tall walls, and like some of the blood had went, like over the wall, like into the storeroom. So like it was a stage, but they also do like production lighting and stuff like
Sure.
that. So they have a showroom on the other sides of our walls, and we weren't even shooting blood that way, but we found blood in there. It was crazy.
Well, you do have a lot of blood in the finale, so I can understand
Yeah,
that, but,
yeah, yeah.
I will say I am my mind is a little bit blown because, I thought for sure that was a regular bar, so
Oh,
mad
Holly will
m
love to hear that. She'll love to hear that. Yeah.
mad props. I'm from Wisconsin. I've been in a few bars in my days, so
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
I
yeah,
will
me too.
say it felt like a real bar, so the production, yeah, was really well
Yeah.
done. Felt like
You
a kind of a dive bar, but
Yeah,
still a
no,
bar, you know?
totally. Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the most interesting aspect of the production design there, the thing that I'm kind of most proud of, it's not a so a lot of bars, they do like the peanuts on the floor.
Yeah, yeah,
So that was my initial idea. We're gonna have peanuts all over the floor. But one of the producers we started talking to is like, that like people are getting thrown on the ground, like, they're walking through here. The monster actually has to do most of his stuff without
right,
shoes on. So they're like that's never gonna work. So what are you gonna use? And we were gonna do cedar chips, and that's really expensive, and you still have the
sure.
problems with the uneven floor. So I had the idea to use sawdust, and everybody was like, "Well, no bar would ever have sawdust." And it's true, no bar would ever put sawdust on the floor like that. But so it's not a realistic thing, but it
Right.
looks freaking cool. Like it looked like almost like a layer of snow over the ground. But the really cool thing about this for anybody that's making horror movies and you're in a location where you can somehow use sawdust, it is the best way to clean up blood off the floor.
Oh,
'Cause, like, you could spill a gallon of blood, like, and it's
yeah.
spilled all over, and you just sprinkle the sawdust around it, take a little broom and a dustpan, and it mops right up. Like, incredible. Like, we had really quick resets on floor stuff. Like, it was so easy to clean up with the sawdust. Now, the downside is you have sawdust everywhere. So,
Right.
by the end of the shoot, we were tracking sawdust in our cars and home, in the holding. It was everywhere. The location owner, it's now been about a year since we shot, and I talked to him maybe 2 months ago, and he's like he's still finding little pockets of sawdust.
Yeah, it does get everywhere, but I was just thinking that too. That would make it easy to clean. It
It
gave
was
it care,
very
you know,
It
it
did.
gave
It's different, right? Like, you know what it reminds me of? It's totally not a touchstone for this movie, but there's the pillow massacre in True Romance. It's
yeah.
like at the end of True Romance, the feathers are everywhere and on the ground. That's kind of what it reminded me of. At least the way it would set, and if the light hit it just right, it looked cool. But yeah, I think it looks really cool. Like I said, it's not necessarily a realistic flourish, but it's a cool flourish.
What's funny is I didn't even question that there was sawdust
Totally.
on
Yeah,
the
yeah, and
floor. I mean,
most people won't. Yeah, yeah.
it just is for the type of bar it was and everything. It was like, oh, okay. I didn't even really think of it. I'm like, oh, there's sawdust there. Look at that. Okay. Uh,
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. You know,
but
uh,
but yeah, it did look great. It looked great. One of the things though we mentioned about the multiple casts that you have, plus your editing. I imagine being the editor, you were able to kind of piece in your head how you were going to put it together, but still, how much of a challenge was that with so many moving pieces at once? And it surprised me. It's not like you're just focused on, well, these two and these two. There's a lot of scenes where you have 5 to 7 principals in front of
yeah,
your camera.
yeah, no, so that was probably the biggest challenge directorially, for
Hmm.
the movie. So inside the bar, we have 12 cast members. One's in the bathroom, but there's 11 in that room, and then 10 after Felissa dies.
Right.
But spoiler. But so yes, you have to keep track of where everybody is, and also, like I said, we only had 6 days. So
Right.
every time when you're shooting a movie and you're doing coverage, every time you move somebody from like here, to the other side of the room, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
You might have to have a relight, or moving the camera, whatever it is. So you have to temper the need to keep things dynamic and moving,
Mhm.
and character blocking with, we only got 6 days to shoot this thing,
Right.
and then keeping in mind, and then on top of all of that, and we're just talking about physical blocking now you also have to remember where each and every character is, like, emotionally, like, moment to
Right.
moment. And like I said, we were pretty much shooting in continuity, but we're shooting one side of the room or one group of characters, for
Mhm.
2 hours, then we turn around and shoot the other group of characters, and through that scene. So, there's moments you're like, okay, well, how did the person say that? And the other thing to this, how should they react to that? Like that. That was all very complicated. There was a couple of moments where, and I'm like, I've edited for many years, so, like,
Sure.
I'm pretty good with, like, knowing my coverage, knowing where people are, like, all of that. There were a couple of moments where, like, I was going to our producer, Kevin Caliber. He is acting in the movie, and he just
Mhm.
has a really freaking sharp mind for continuity. So, because that was another thing on this, what would have made that easier is if I would have had a full-time script
Sure.
supervisor,
Right.
and on
Yep.
this movie, it was something
Mhm.
that we could not afford. And to be honest, in the past, on less complicated, things,
Right.
I've done without a script supervisor many times, and I've
Mhm.
never regretted it.
Sure.
This was the first time in my entire career where I didn't have a supervisor, and I was like, this was a mistake. I should have had a script supervisor. You know, I mean, in the end, it worked out fine. But if I
Sure.
had it to do over again, I would have
Right.
found that extra money for that position for sure.
Because I think people don't realize continuity when they're witnessing it. If it's done properly, you don't notice it. But when it's out, like a person moves or something, your eye catches it subconsciously, even if you're not physically looking for it. You're like, oh, wait.
Totally, totally. And I'm
You
not
know,
like, I'm, of all the things to worry about, like, in
Mhm.
filmmaking, like, physical continuity is probably the thing I care least about.
Sure.
Like, if
Sure.
somebody's arms
Hmm.
here, they're there. Like, as long as the emotion's there. But, like, where a script supervisor really comes in handy, a good one, is like they do keep track of, like, well, not only was this person, holding this, but like their level of intensity or where they were looking, or you know what
Right.
I mean? It's like that stuff really, really helps. And I'm usually good at keeping it all in my
Mhm.
head, but when you get 11 people in 6 days, there's a few moments where honestly I was kind of winging it. But you know, we made it work, you know.
And, you co-wrote this with Gregory,
Mm.
and, was there a lot of collaboration between both of you, or did he come up with it and then you kind of revised it, or how did that, play out for where this, story came from?
Yeah, well, this is kind of it was an unusual like path to the movie. I mean, initially I wrote the script by myself,
Mhm.
at least 10 years ago.
Wow.
Maybe 12. It's an old script.
Wow.
Like
Yeah.
when I first moved to LA and started making movies, there were periods where I'd make a movie and then I wouldn't do another one for a year. So I was
Mhm.
writing a lot.
Mhm.
And this was always just one of my favorite scripts. And I just never got it going. But over the
Sure.
years, I had, rewrote it and rewrote
Mhm.
it and rewrote it. So when I decided to pull the trigger on this, I was looking at it and I was like all of these rewrites, and it was kind of suffering from the weight of being
Mhm.
rewritten so many times. And I was like, it
Sure.
really needs a fresh perspective. And I had known Gregory, I'd interviewed him for my podcast a few years before,
Sure.
and I
Mhm.
knew he did writing stuff, and he had given
Mhm.
me notes on another script that was like really, really good script notes. So
Mhm.
I contacted him to see if he'd be interested in working on the script with me. So I basically gave him my last draft of the script. We talked about it, what I was trying
Mhm.
to accomplish, and this and that. And then he just went off and did a pass. And then I took his pass and made a few other changes,
Mhm.
and then that's what we shot.
And from just a viewer, I find that when I find out that filmmakers have had other people look at the work, it's usually helps the work, versus someone who, well, this is mine. I'm going to do it this way. They don't show it to anyone. This is how it's going to be, and then in the end, it works. But there's some things you figure you could clean up. So that's great that
Yeah,
you were able to
yeah,
do
like
that.
yeah, I was happy to have him on. And I mean, one thing that he like brought to it, like there were some humorous moments, but he
Mhm.
brought a couple of little like funny lines that, and
Sure.
initially I didn't like them. I was kind of like,
Right.
and I wasn't sure, and he just kept saying trust me. So I was like, all right, I'll leave him in. And in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm just gonna cut this and
You're
get
just
it.
gonna cut it, right?
But 90%
Mhm,
worked great. So yeah, and he has like one issue, like before I gave the rewrite is and even a little bit in the final version, it is an overly complex, like the
mhm,
relationships and who's who. And so like in my script, I think it was like even a little more confusing because as
mhm,
a writer, I tend to err maybe too far on the side of
mm,
not telling
sure,
too much, like not being
mhm.
too on the nose. And maybe I do that to the point where it's like mad confusing, you know?
Sure,
So
sure.
like, so one of the things that he brought is he really did bring like a focus to it
Mhm.
and like streamlined it a little more than it was. So
Well,
I think that was a good addition.
one of the things that worked really well, I thought, for me, for building up the tension and for the final reveal when we do get to actually see the creature, was the flashbacks that you had set up in there. Now
Yeah.
those some of those were on location in that,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah. So
So
most every anything that's not in the bar was
mhm.
pretty much shot in the special effects guy's house in Canoga Park. So the
Nice.
house doubled as a
Sure.
couple of places, the bedrooms and whatnot, and then the backyard doubled
Mhm.
for outside the bar. It doubled for
Sure.
inside the bar for some of the monster stuff. And he has like this little like vestibule area
Mhm.
outside where we did a couple other things. But yeah, it was all there or the bar.
Well, and it shows you need to get creative and make it look like different,
Totally. Yeah,
locations,
yeah. Yeah, if
and
I had one regret about the locations is like I really wish I had a shot or two outside an
mhm.
actual real bar that, like showed some scope. Like we got a couple where they're kind of staring at the wall, but that's basically we had to keep the frame, like this
Yeah,
because it was a house and you're like a little bit
right.
more, you see the chimney and shit. But so I always kind of regretted that. There was a point
Mm.
where I was even like, let's just go steal the shot somewhere, but it was the
Sure,
logistics
sure.
were so, 'cause there's so many people involved, and I was just
Yeah,
like, at the
yeah.
end of the day, we're like, let's just do it like legit and not
Mhm.
not mess with the guerrilla stuff on this one.
Well, I mean, it still all works and blends together, and I
Yeah. Yeah,
you
no,
know,
it's
sure.
fine. It's a minor gripe, but,
Yeah.
I wish I had 1 or 2, you know?
Yeah, I think you always have that with a project, right?
Oh,
Is it
totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I talk
100%.
I talked to a couple directors who have said that, who said, "Yeah, at one point I just have to stop, put it out into the world, and then it's no longer mine, and I move on. I can't keep because otherwise I will
Yeah, yeah.
never, you'll never release it because you're always tweaking."
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The last week, before I delivered was
Sure.
just
Yeah.
torture. Because like, I would export it, and then, and every time you export it, you have to watch it again
Wait,
because you have
yeah.
to make sure the export came out
Mhm.
right. So every single time I'd export it, I'd just catch something. I'd be like, "Oh, wait, I gotta change that." So then I gotta start the process all over again,
Uh,
and then by about the 3rd time, I'm like, "Jesus, I'm just making changes now. I'm not necessarily making it better, I'm just making
right.
changes, like, I just gotta stop." That's one of the hardest things as a filmmaker. I've heard it said before that you never finish a movie, you just abandon
Right.
it at some point.
Mm.
And I think the trick to like longevity or having a career in independent film is
Mhm.
like knowing when to say, okay, this is what it is, and
Right.
move on.
It is what it is, little warts and all, but, and it's stuff that because 'cause you're behind the scenes and it's so integral in your life for when you're making the film, I imagine that, other people won't observe what you're seeing. You're just seeing it because
Totally.
you because
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah, yeah. I
because
mean,
'cause you've
some
been
will,
living
but
in it, right?
yeah,
Well, some
yeah.
will, but,
So yeah, yeah.
um,
But yeah, for the most part, anybody that notices some of these things that I'm complaining about now, I'm
eh
like, I don't really care if they like it or not anyway. You know,
Nice. Yeah.
because even as a viewer, like I mentioned continuity there, like I'm really not a continuity cop. Like I don't
Sure.
care. Like
Sure.
you remember they had all that fervor over Game of Thrones a few years ago because
Mhm.
there's like a Starbucks cup there. I don't give a shit. Like, you know what I mean? And, like if it's not, and I saw the scene, I didn't notice it. I was like, okay,
I
great.
didn't.
And then when somebody
Uh,
pointed it out, then I was like, oh yeah, okay, now I see it. But
right.
so what? It's like, so what? Anyway, and people that do get hung up on stuff like that, I'm like, I don't even want to know you.
Well, I think some of them, they make it their mission to find that
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah, and there are some
it's
people
like
that take genuine enjoyment out of looking for that thing, and that's
sure.
a completely different thing, you
Right,
know? Yeah,
right,
yeah,
but people run with it, like you said, there's articles about, "Oh, there's a water bottle on the Game of Thrones set," and yeah, like you,
right.
I've watched the episode a couple times, I go, "Wh where?" Then you watch the video, go,
Yeah, I had to watch the
"Oh,
video to
yeah."
see it. Yeah, because I didn't. I did watch the episode again, and I was like, "Where is it? I don't." And then I saw the video. Oh, okay, yeah, there it is. But whatever.
So with the characters that you have, there is a diverse group, and I like
Mm,
that because a lot of times when you have multiple characters, they tend to feel all the same. But
yes.
you have that here, where there is, like I mentioned earlier, the mom and the dynamic. One character in particular, how much of her was written and how much of her was just a performance by Ashley Undercuffler as Frenzy? Because she was by far my favorite character in this, and I loved all the characters, but her in
Yeah, yeah.
particular, it
No, I
was
love to hear it.
she was just like I'm like, I would love to see a movie with that character because man,
Yeah. No,
she's not
she
go ahead.
was great. She was great.
Sorry.
And
Mhm.
so, like, all the lines that are coming out of her mouth are all in the script.
Mhm.
But the performance is like it's 100% her. Like,
Mhm.
we did work on it, and like one of my first pieces of direction to her, and this wasn't just talking in general about the character. It's
Right.
like when you're doing a character that has over the top moments, like there's one of two ways to approach it. You can approach it safe, and
Mhm.
maybe it'll be a little like, like boring or flat.
Right.
But if you're going to go for it, you have to let go all the
Right.
way. Like you have to totally abandon and go for it. And if it's too much, I'll let you know. And then, and she really embraced that. So like for the over the top stuff, she just like somebody on set mentioned that it was like Nick Cage, like
Yeah, it was.
in a
Yeah.
very good way, because I really like Nicholas Cage's over the top
Yeah.
stuff because it's still like controlled chaos.
Mhm.
So it's the same thing for her. It was like she let go, but it's controlled. And then, when it came to the emotional stuff, she really,
Mhm.
dug in and went to some dark places. And, I made sure to give her like the space to be able to do that and take a little
Sure.
bit extra time with those scenes. And she really delivered. She was going to be, I knew she was going to be good, but I
Right.
didn't realize, like how good. And
Mhm.
that's kind of like, that's how independent film is. It's like, because we don't have, like months and months to, chemistry
Right.
read people and like all of that. It's pretty much you get an audition, a callback, you might get a rehearsal, and then you're shooting. So the cast in general just like was above and beyond what my expectations were. You know.
Yeah, she was well, what I like is most of the addicts were somewhat sympathetic characters, except
Yeah, yeah,
I hate to say it, except maybe her.
yeah, yeah.
She was like the true bad guy of the group, you
Right,
know?
right, right, right. Yeah. The
You know,
only thing that really humanized her, was, her relationship with
relationship, right.
Lo. I thought that was sweet,
Mhm.
like, I liked that. And I liked how upset she was and hurt and, destroyed
Right.
when she did die, so I think that garners a little empathy. But yeah, she's just she's fun to not like. And yeah, and it's funny, I never even would have, considered
Mhm.
like some kind of like prequel spin off with two characters, but I would like to see something with those guys running through different scenarios, you know. Like
Yeah,
I really like their dynamic and the actresses were just great together.
yeah, I like the low character too, and just between them, even though she doesn't say much, it just
Yeah,
when she has her moment, it's like, wow, okay, I didn't see that coming, and it just made that pair even more. It's like, I just worry about those 2, don't worry about everyone else.
totally. Totally. And they both got good deaths. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
spoiler.
Oh, well, now that's okay.
Yeah, no, I don't care.
People should still see this, but, what would you say was the I like asking this question because it's always interesting. What would you say was the easiest scene for you to shoot that you thought maybe was going to be the most challenging?
Hmm. Um Probably the monster stuff,
Mhm.
for me. Now
Right.
it was really hard on Bravo,
Sure.
but Xavier playing the
Mhm.
monster and a couple other people that were in the monster suit. So then that thing's like, 30 pounds of, like latex and
Sure.
rubber, and it was in the middle of summer. But, that stuff I thought was gonna be much more difficult to block and shoot,
Mhm.
and it was fairly easy. Like excuse me.
Yep.
One of the aspects of it that I was concerned about is we didn't have a lot of time. So
Mhm.
I was really concerned about, okay, like the monster's here and he's walking there and we're shooting him here. And are we going to be able to get enough coverage of, because it's really hard to move the monster from one point to another.
Sure.
Because
Mhm.
like basically you have to take the head off the actor, let him walk the blocking like 3 times. And then as soon as he's back on one, they put the head on and you go and you just
Sure.
hope because he can't see real well.
Right.
So it made that really like that part of it difficult. But one thing, because the third act in this movie is so chaotic, like it almost didn't matter. So like there are a lot of shots of the monster, like where he's walking from one point to
Mhm.
another and he's not there. Like it's a shot from somewhere else.
Sure.
Because it was so chaotic, it really didn't matter. Like if he's looking this way or that way, you just flop him. And okay, the light's in the wrong spot, but it doesn't really matter because of how quick it's all coming together. And how seamlessly that all came together was pretty. I don't know if it was dumb luck or just, you know, I mean, I described like shooting movies fastly. This one, it had a total of I think 15
Mhm.
days. But
Right.
I've shot movies quicker. I've shot them in
Sure.
6 days, 3 days, 4 days, and I describe that kind of shooting sometimes as like shot clock pool. Like you don't
Mhm.
really have time to line up and agonize over your shot. You just have to take it, take the shot, take the shot, take the shot. And I think over the years I've just got instinctively like pretty good at that. So when I'm
Mhm.
in a situation like that, I can just kind of like, okay, just put it here, shoot this. Okay, just put it there, shoot that, and then make it work. But I'd say that was probably the most surprisingly
Mhm.
easy for me.
Well, it probably helps too with the effects that you have looking that good. That probably helped quite a bit
Oh,
as well
totally,
for that.
totally.
And I was very happy with the practical effects versus CGI.
Oh yeah.
I know indie films work on a budget, and I've seen use of CGI in various qualities. Was there debate of whether or not you would use more CGI, or did you always plan to use practical?
It was always pretty much all practical. There was always, some ideas about augmenting some
Sure.
stuff with
Yep. Hmm.
CG. Now, like we honestly just didn't have the budget to really do it.
Sure.
But there was some talk about like giving more life to some of the
Hmm.
parts on the monster, like through CG, which we just couldn't pull off. There's a few like there's a gunshot that is
Hmm.
augmented. It is real, but there's also there's a
Sure.
digital component to it. There's one other moment where a character is getting their head split open, and there's a split second burst of CG blood before the
Hmm.
real blood hits, just because the timing was slightly off. But that's really it. I think in horror movies, especially with blood stuff,
Hmm.
I think when it's completely substituted, you can usually tell, and it looks
Yeah.
false or weightless or something. But I think you can do little augmentations on it
Hmm.
where it's good. So that's kind of
Yeah.
my approach with it. And then we did some pretty heavy CG de-aging on some characters, which
Sure.
I was pretty proud of in this, honestly, because when the effects guy told me that he thought he could do it, because we were just makeup and
Right.
lights, you
Hmm.
know, and I didn't believe him, but he was like, just let me try a shot. So he tried a shot, and I was like, I mean, especially for a movie at this budget level, I've
Hmm.
never seen it done like that, like to that degree.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, let's freaking do it. And so he's actually doing a video on that right now,
Nice.
to talk about how he did it, because it's actually pretty easy. In the next 5 years, things are going to change so much. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
man.
in a lot of things, especially I saw some videos, it kind of broke my creative heart a little bit about AIs putting together
Mhm.
scripts and that. And I'm like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
oh,
Well,
come on, you know. It's like,
I would never, well, you know what? I'll never say never, but
mhm,
at least right now, I would say I would never, use it as like a writing crutch. But
sure.
but but that said, like I do documentaries as well. So like I'll
Mhm.
be doing voiceover stuff for documentaries, and if it's a subject I might not know a lot about, as opposed to like researching and get on
Sure,
Wikipedia and
yeah.
write it, I might ask ChatGPT to give me 280 words on Bigfoots in Georgia, and then take that and rewrite it,
Right, right.
and
And
so I think used like that, it can be cool.
mhm,
And even in art, like if you're doing like poster art and whatnot, like I totally wouldn't not use Photoshop and design a thing, but to get some elements sometimes,
sure.
because that's honestly, that's what a lot of poster designers do on the internet. They go and they
Mhm,
find stock
sure.
images, or sometimes they even just straight out steal them, and then they manipulate those
Yeah.
images and put them into a poster. But
Mhm,
now with AI, you can kind of get some of those elements done for you, and actually done better, and
sure.
then put them together. And for me, I'm a low budget filmmaker. Like, that's
Right.
exciting, because
Mhm,
like when I finish a horror movie, if I want to first run poster, it's about anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 for a
right.
really good one. But now with AI and some of those elements, like I can get a lot of those elements, and I have some decent graphic design skills. I can make that happen for nothing now. And I feel bad for a graphic artist that might be working at that level. But
Right.
honestly, like, a lot of these low budget movies, we're doing it ourselves anyway. Like, we
Right.
weren't we weren't gonna pay someone to do it anyway. We were gonna work with what we had. And this is
Right.
just a tool to do it a little bit better, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, and some distributors I've seen they use the same template for a number of different movies and that over the years. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's not just the small budget stuff. I've seen many different things to where I'm like, "Oh, I know that template."
Oh, absolutely. There's a low budget distributor, I won't name them, but they put out a bunch. One of them was one of our horror movies, and like the female model in it, like she's from behind, but you can recognize her, like in like I don't know, like 30 movies. Like it's the same
Yeah.
pose. Like sometimes the
Uh,
clothes are different, but the pose is exactly the same. The hair is the
uh.
same. Like, yeah, 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 totally.
That's the joys of indie filmmaking, which you've been doing for quite some time, and you don't just do horror, which surprised me. You kind of run the gambit of genres. Is that because is that for you creatively, or is that a more of a business decision? I was kind of curious because some people stay in one lane and that's
Yeah, yeah.
what they make,
Well,
you
it's a
know?
little of both. I mean, really, at the core of it, both as a filmmaker and as a fan, I have really broad tastes.
Mhm.
Like I love horror. If I had to pick a favorite genre, I probably would say horror.
Sure.
But I like romantic comedies too,
Mhm.
and I like dramas and I like thrillers and I like comedies, so as a filmmaker, I tend to follow my tastes.
Mhm.
So and then on which has also afforded me like a business acumen. So,
Sure.
if there's a period of time where say horror isn't working so much for me, I can go do some comedies. And, and it's not like I'm just chasing a dollar.
Mhm.
I truly like them and love them.
Right. Mhm.
I'm not just, hopping for business reasons. But I like when you're making a living doing low budget stuff,
Mhm.
like you need to have every bullet in your gun,
Yeah.
you know? So is and which is what led me to, it's like documentaries about,
Mhm.
3 years ago. I never had any interest in as a filmmaker in doing documentaries. And we went through a shakeup in the industry where
Sure.
movies just weren't making the same amount of money. And somebody had suggested that I try a documentary, and I did. And through the process of making it, I like watching them, but didn't
Sure.
really want to make them. But through the process of making it, I
Mhm.
realized, wow, this actually is cool. It's a totally different thing. You're learning about new subjects. I like interviewing. I don't necessarily have to be interested in the subject, but I have to
Mhm.
be interested in the people.
Right.
And
Mhm.
I just found it fascinating. And I tend to do documentaries about fairly like positive subjects, or
Mhm.
yeah, and even when I do stuff like Bigfoot documentaries or UFO, I don't take a exploitive angle
Sure,
on it.
sure,
I
yeah.
usually go nuts and boltsy about
Mhm.
who are the people behind this that are studying this and why they study it, and that all fascinates me, so I like that. But I did documentaries for maybe 3 or 4
Mhm.
years without doing a narrative in between. And
Right.
I started feeling the itch. I was like, I really, because like it's a totally different kind of creative expression to do a
Sure.
narrative in a documentary. So like I really wanted to do another narrative, but I didn't necessarily want to go back and do another like 5,000 or
Mhm.
$20,000 narrative. I wanted to do
Sure.
something a little grander and
Mhm.
spend a little more time on it. And because I have the background in documentary now and I have so many documentaries out, I can financially take the time to
Sure.
spend a year on a low budget horror movie,
Mhm.
which a lot of people can't.
Yeah, and, I find that even the big studios are taking that model of sorts. What would you consider, because you've been doing this for some time, why we've seen, and I'm not complaining at all as a fan, why we've seen such a resurgence of horror? I mean, from bigger studios. Usually, for a while, it was the indie realm doing the horror, and maybe you get another. But now, in the last, like, pretty much just before COVID start, but
Yeah.
especially after, we're like in a horror renaissance again.
Yeah, totally. And you have some really small independent horror movies that are getting like theatricals and are making
Mhm.
millions of dollars, Terrifier and the Winnie the Pooh thing and Skinamark Inc.,
Yeah,
whatever it's called.
Skinamark, yeah.
That's that, you know. I mean, I honestly wish I had a good answer, but I
Mm,
don't.
yeah.
What my opinion like on the industry and like, like trying to follow it is it's a fool's errand. Like
Yeah.
anybody that says they have it figured out and they know what's gonna hit, that they're either
Right.
lying, naive, or or they're just like brilliant beyond my comprehension.
Sure,
Because
sure.
like at least now, like there when
Mhm,
I first started making movies, between 2008 and 14, there was a formula you could
mhm,
follow. Like I was working for a lot of producers directing movies for them,
mhm.
directing and editing,
Right.
and they did have it kind of figured out. If you made a movie for a certain budget point, like 50,000 to 25, put in a B or a C level name for a couple of scenes, do it at least
Yeah.
competently, you could pretty much guarantee you're gonna
Mhm.
at least break even and
Right.
maybe make some money. I don't think that's true anymore.
Mhm.
Like I just don't, regardless of the level you're shooting at. It could be 2,000, it could be 200,000. The odds of making money on that feature are just less.
Yeah.
So, and no, you just can't predict. So, like, horror's had this, like you said, it's had a resurgence the last couple of years. I don't think it could have been predicted, and I don't
Mhm.
think there's any way to know like how
Right.
long it'll last or what'll be next. I mean, I just talked to a filmmaker actually on the phone earlier today, and he started doing these like kind of like PG-13 raunchy comedies for
Yeah.
very 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 low budgets,
Mhm.
and he's making more money than a lot of bigger movies. You know,
Yeah.
like yeah.
It
So
it
you just never know.
yeah, it's always interesting to try to see the trend, especially from just as a viewer watching suddenly,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
Well,
it, you
and
know.
I think people should also remember, so, like Skinamark and the Winnie the
Sure.
Pooh and Terrifier, like, yes, they did great, and it seems like a pattern, but it's not really.
No.
Like, all 3
Mhm.
of those movies, they are outliers, and I'm not saying they're not good movies, but they did get lucky. You
Right.
know?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I'm not saying it
Yeah.
wasn't earned, but
Mhm.
there's an element of luck to that. And 3 movies does not necessarily an industry pattern to make, you know? And
Right.
then on the other side, you have, like, Paramount, making
Mhm.
hundreds of millions with Smile and, like, stuff like that. But
Right.
again, it's like, it's not if you look at the whole industry and everything that's out, way more losing than winning.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
seems to be, especially with the, and I think part of it though is, I find it hilarious to see how the studios embraced horror again because they realized, oh, the horror community, and I fully admit it, we'll go out and see just about any horror film in the on the big screen,
Oh,
regardless
totally.
of whether or not we think it's going to be good or not. We're going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
go see it, and you get butts in the seats, and it's all about that first opening weekend now. So, okay, I've got like say Shazam
Mm,
made for this hundreds of millions of dollars, gets 30 million opening weekend, well, that's a
right.
complete bomb. I make this horror film or pick up this horror film that was made for, say, 5 million.
Yeah, yeah.
It makes 30 million. Hey.
Totally, totally. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what the
Uh,
budget was, but I'm sure Scream exponentially made
oh,
more
yeah.
than Shazam, like, on a, relative level, from budget
Right.
to
Yeah.
exposition.
Yeah, so, I just find it interesting to see the trends, but being a horror fan, I'm happy now. I mean,
Yeah, no, I mean, and,
yeah.
like, the success of these things, like, we will see more because if
Mhm.
there's one thing Hollywood friggin' does, whether it's independent or regular Hollywood is, like, whatever hit last week, there's gonna be a bunch more of. I mean, just look at Facebook right now, like, all the people running, like, crowdfunders for, like,
Mhm.
drug animal movies right now.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's insane. It's insane. Like that, I'm just like, "Man, alright, cool."
Well, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, more power to them. I'm
More,
not no
yeah.
judgment, but I'm just like, yeah,
I
that's it. Yeah. But
I
we'll see how those actually fare. And
right.
I don't know. Remains to be seen.
Yeah, it does. All it takes is one of those to kind of bomb out, and then all of a sudden the trend kind of, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's wild to see what's out there now. But thanks to the hype in that, I think that may have helped Craving get out there and get
Yeah,
more eyes on it.
totally.
And
Yeah, I've been amazed at the, like, response to it,
mhm,
especially because when you make a movie for 100 grand or under, there's a big chunk of the population that won't know how to take that movie.
right.
You know what I mean? They see it
Mhm,
like I think, and we're in a time right now where there's a huge amount of movies being put out. So, like, I actually think that's helped Craving, at least, like, critically and, like, the
mhm,
ratings and stuff. Because if Craving would have came out in 2016, so it would have came out the first weekend, and
right.
when they first come out, like an independent film, you're gonna get friends and family, you're gonna get cast and crew, they're gonna go on IMDb and they're gonna rate it a 7 or an 8 or, or a 10,
Sure.
and so you'll have a pretty good rating. And then when the movie actually starts hitting more platforms or it starts getting pirated, you'll basically start getting review bombed. Because,
Yeah.
like, some, like, troll on the internet will see this movie has a 7.5 and, it's really probably about a 4 or a 5. And so they'll go in and give it a 1 and
Right.
they just get review bombed. So you have all these independent films back then with like really, really low star ratings, whether it be on Amazon or IMDb or
Mhm.
whatever. But like with ours, like it stayed pretty high. And I think that's because there's just so much stuff out that trolls haven't caught on yet. But they will. I'm kind of waiting. I'm waiting
Uh-huh.
for that shoe to drop, honestly. But so far, man, I think we're at like a 4.5 on Amazon, and like I don't know, like a 7.5 or something on IMDb, which for a low budget movie like this is that's a pretty high rating.
It's one thing that I've noticed, at least personally from just getting involved with the films, though, is I think the pandemic, it sounds bad, but it's one of the more the things that come out of it kind of a positive was it
Mm,
seems like suddenly people discovered indie films because they were sitting at home. Big studios weren't releasing
right,
a whole lot,
right,
but
right, right.
people wanted to consume stuff. And especially like YouTube and online reviewers and bloggers, they needed material. So they
Yeah,
started to branch out and go, well, what is this movie like,
right.
Craving, or even like Terrifier, or
Yeah,
what's that about? And all of a sudden they watch it and they go, well, this is actually more competently made than I expected a low budget or micro budget film to be. And then that starts them looking further. And pretty soon I was seeing some YouTubers out there, the bigger name ones who would only cover like the big films, covering these direct to video films now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're talking to these indie films, which for me as a fan of indie horror, I'm happy. I'm like, that's
Yeah,
great to get more eyes, because I think if sometimes some films, if you could kind of look past maybe the budget aesthetic, because
totally.
there's some great performances, some great stories out there for
Yeah,
sure.
totally. I mean, I made Craving, and I think it looks pretty good,
It
but
does.
it's at the end of the day, it's still $100,000 movie.
Sure.
Like nobody's gonna mistake it for a Universal film,
Right.
But but yeah, I think that people have I don't want to say lowered expectations, but they've broadened
Mhm.
their expectations of
Right.
film. And like I said earlier, the marketplace is tougher to make a dime now. So like
Sure.
one of the methods to make money is to make movies cheaper and cheaper. So you're gonna see more of them, and they're gonna be cheaper.
Yeah.
So I mean that's why like Tubi has exploded so much in the last couple of years.
Yeah, Tubi and Freevee and a number of these
Mhm.
other like free streamings, and especially Tubi getting so much indie content. It's
Oh
like,
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
you
Like it's
know,
done great things for the
mm.
indie, marketplace. I'm curious to see how long like that bubble lasts, because
Sure.
like Amazon 4 years ago was
Yeah.
fantastic. Like man, I mean, if Amazon hadn't dropped their rates, I'd be a really wealthy man right now. Like if the
Yeah,
stuff I was making, that I've made in
sure.
between now and then was making the rate that Amazon was paying back then, I mean,
Uh,
I would have made 14 or 15 times what I did last year.
but they did their purge of the indie scene, which was unfortunate.
Mm.
For a number of I know a number of filmmakers had to either have their stuff pulled or had their stuff pulled, or it just wasn't worth having up
Yeah, yeah,
because,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you didn't get
no.
pulled, your rates dropped from something like 14 cents an hour down to like 1 cent an
Yeah,
hour,
yeah.
in general.
In general.
They still have a sliding scale, so there are
Sure.
still people that are making,
Mhm.
the 12 cents, but it's very few. Very few.
So so what would you say is your biggest influence, or what made you want to really get into this whole crazy business in the first place?
So, I feel like the cliche, like white filmmaker saying it, but it was honestly Tarantino.
Mhm.
So, like, I was always a movie guy.
Sure.
Like that's what I did. Like from 3 to 18. And I'd seen a ton of movies. I could name what actors were in what movie. I could tell you who
Yep.
directed it, like all that stuff, but I had no real conception of what a director was. I didn't
Mhm.
really understand it, you know? And then I think I was 18 when Reservoir
Mhm.
Dogs came out, and
Mm.
I'm listening to this dude, and Quentin Tarantino was like a rock star in
Yeah, yeah, he
92.
was, yeah.
Like they just don't have like directors are not famous in the way he was then.
Right.
Like it's like it was something else. Like and you're hearing him talk, and like him or not, you're hearing him talk about other filmmakers
Mhm.
and other directors and other, like I discovered Hong Kong film through him talking about it.
Sure.
like stuff like that, and him talking about directing and all, and it just clicked. Oh, this is what directing is. You
Mhm.
know, of course, from my younger years, I loved like Sam Raimi and John
Right.
Carpenter. I loved the movies, but I didn't
Mhm.
understand the directorial aspect of it
Right.
until it was basically spoon fed to me through Tarantino. So like Reservoir Dogs isn't like my favorite all time movie or nothing, but
Mhm.
it's like it's my gateway movie like
Sure.
into understanding filmmaking. So
Mhm.
it's Tarantino. But then like stylistically, especially in horror, like John Carpenter is a
Yeah.
big one. I mentioned Peter Jackson earlier
Mhm.
for the type of gore stuff that I love Peter Jackson. Um uh uh you know John Landis,
Mhm.
all the classics. Yeah, yeah.
Well, those all are good influences, and they've influenced many people. And yeah, hopefully your film influences people.
Yeah.
It's a fun movie, and yeah, it's a blast, and I hope a lot of people get eyes on it because it's why I love indie cinema is finding films like this.
Yeah.
We just be honest. There's some films where you're watching them, you're going, you know what? I love the spirit. I love the energy. It probably shouldn't have been released to the public. You should have just kept it among your friends. But you know,
Yeah, yeah.
more
I've made
props.
I've made a few.
Yeah,
I've made a few.
those types of films. Mad props for you putting it out there, but Craving is definitely one that should be watched, and hopefully you get a lot more eyes on it and has continued success. Now, what do you got coming up on your deck?
So the next one, so when I jumped back into narrative films, I went all in. So I
Sure.
have kind of a 3-year plan, 3-picture plan,
Oh, okay.
all in the monster movie milieu.
Mhm.
So, I did Craving. The next one is called A Hard Place, and
Mm.
it's a bigger, actually much bigger, monster movie. It's kind of a monster verse monster thing.
Ooh,
Again, it's following a group
sure.
of criminals. They're on the lam in the Rocky Mountains, or
Oh, okay.
like
Mhm.
possibly Arkansas or Appalachians maybe. But anyway, they end up in a really tiny town and in the
Mhm.
middle of an ancient feud between two clans of monsters.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's two completely like
Sure.
new mythology, new types of
Mhm.
monsters, and there's not just like one of them. There's
Right.
several on either side, so it's like really big in the action. Again, big on the human drama. It's
Mhm.
it's bigger in scope and budget than anything I've done before. So, and
Wow.
then I hope to follow that up the following year with another one.
Well, that's exciting. Look forward to seeing that. Hopefully, you can get the campaign in that going for it.
Yeah,
Because you do a lot of crowdfunding, correct, for your projects, or
I
try
mean,
to? Or
so I dabbled a little bit before
Mhm.
Craving. I ran a crowdfunder for
Mhm.
another movie I was producing called 16 Bits, and then but I honestly never thought I could raise that much on my own.
Mhm.
But in between 16 Bits and when I decided to try the crowdfunder for Craving, I had started my own YouTube channel. I'd
Sure.
gotten a little better on camera.
Mhm.
I felt like people liked me.
Sure.
I was like, I think maybe I could raise more money. So I tried
Mm.
it with Craving. And really, the main impetus is, again, it's like I said, the business has gotten tough.
Right.
And if you make, I'm not a rich man. If I were to put, 20 or $30,000 into a movie,
Mhm.
and that's a pretty low budget movie, like that could potentially like, wreck my
You
year,
you you'll be eating a lot of ramen, is what you're
Exactly,
saying.
exactly. And, at the end of the day,
Mhm.
you have a less than probably 50% chance of actually returning it and making a
Right.
profit. If you're
Right.
talking, and I'm talking in generalities here, just
Right.
statistically. Statistically, you have a less than probably a way less than 50% chance of
Mhm.
making any money on any kind of indie movie. So and I've also, as far as narratives go, I've kind of gotten to a place where I'm not happy
Mm.
making 20 or $30,000 movies anymore.
Sure.
I could probably pretty easily put together 20 or 30 in equity for a movie, but I wouldn't be happy with the movie.
Right.
I've gotten to the point where my taste and how I want to shoot and how I want to pay people and how much time I want to spend and the
Mhm.
quality I want of it, where I can't make movies anymore, for
Right.
under 50, probably I wouldn't even consider it.
Mhm.
Um, so with it being harder to make that profit or make the money back for the investors, crowdfunding makes a little more sense
Sure.
because, with the exception of the perks, there's nothing to pay back.
Right,
So
right.
like,
Yeah.
we like on Craving, for example, I said we raised almost $70,000,
Mhm.
and then there's about another like 2025 in equity. But the movie only needs to make thirty thousand
Right,
dollars to pay the people back and put a little bit of money in people's pocket.
right.
Whereas if that had all been equity,
Yeah.
I think it's gonna do well and do well past that, but there's a good
Mhm.
possibility that it won't. And then
Mhm.
moving into something like a hard place where that budget's exponentially higher, like without a strong like crowdfunding element to it,
Yeah.
I wouldn't feel like even like I would feel a little weird morally even raising that much money for
Sure.
something like that at this
Sure.
point, and
Yeah.
the people expecting it back, you know?
Right,
So
right.
for that's why crowdfunding appeals to me. And then
Mhm.
over the course of doing the Craving thing, like, it wasn't that bad.
Mhm.
Like, interacting with the people and, like,
Sure.
I just sound like a king or something, interacting with the people. No, but
Right.
interacting with folks that
Mhm.
are into the project and want to
Right.
support it, like, that's pretty incredible. And
Mhm.
I found, like, I don't look at it as, like, asking for money. I feel like we're giving something of value to the
Right.
people, whether that's the movie itself or like getting involved with the movie and like
Mhm.
having their voice in it for a second or having their picture in it for a second. Like there's people that love that,
Mhm.
and I like to, and I have no problem giving it to them, you
Sure.
know.
Sure.
So I think it's overall a good thing. I think there's filmmakers that take advantage of it. I think
Mm.
there's, filmmakers that they err a little bit too far on the side of,
Sure.
like the paid roles and whatnot.
Right.
I don't have a problem with it in general if it's handled the right way, but I think there's
Right.
people that don't. And,
Mhm.
I think there's some examples of some really bad movies where they put way too many in, you
Mhm.
know? But I overall, I think crowdfunding is a cool thing. And so, I'll do this one. And, if it goes well, I might do the next one like that.
Mm.
Or I might go back to equity or, who knows, or back into
Who knows?
self-finance.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just do the Kevin Smith a bunch of credit cards, right? And then pay for it later.
Totally. And I've been there. I've done
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
So where can people follow you? You said you got a YouTube channel. I checked it out. It's a great YouTube channel.
Oh, thank you.
License to shill here for you, sir. Where can people keep up with your stuff and check
Yeah.
more of your stuff out?
So I go by the J Horton pretty much everywhere. My
Mm.
YouTube channel, DJ Horton, Instagram and TikTok at DJ Horton. I think the only place I'm Jason Horton is Facebook because they wouldn't let me. They
Sure.
honestly will not let me put the J in the dot. They say it's
Right.
not a name. I'm like, and the only reason I go by the J is because there's a YouTube comedian with a couple of million followers named Jason Horton,
Oh,
and
sure.
we're
Yeah.
about the same age, and
Mhm.
we would get like whenever I would put up a new casting notice, he would start getting calls and vice versa. And after
Sure.
a couple of
Sure.
years, I just professionally changed
Uh,
it to J. But yeah, you can find me everywhere, pretty much J Horton.
Well, this has been a pleasure, Jay. I appreciate it quite a bit. And yeah, everybody check out Craving now. It's on all your major VOD. It's on Amazon. Where else? Most VOD
Yeah,
platforms?
yeah. So right now it's mostly transactional. So,
Mhm.
Amazon, you can rent it on YouTube,
Mhm.
Vudu, I think Apple TV. It'll widen out onto AVOD probably in a month or two. So it'll be
Mhm.
on Tubi and all that. And then hitting foreign and it's starting to go into UK and stuff like that now.
Will we have a physical release?
Yes, yeah. So
Awesome.
I initially I wanted the physical release to coincide with the
Mhm.
streaming release, but unfortunately it was just I was trying to put
Right.
together. So for the crowdfunder, we have a fully loaded Blu-ray, and putting together the extras was just more intensive than I
Sure.
initially thought.
Sure.
So our physical release will be probably in June, maybe July,
Mm.
and
Yeah,
so it'll be a really nice loaded Blu-ray and then
yeah.
slimmed down DVD version.
Excellent. Excellent to hear. And I guess final question is any advice you would like to give someone looking to get into the indie filmmaking business?
Yeah. So I'm gonna give kind of the glass half empty answer.
Sure.
It's tough, guys. Like I love it, and there's nothing else I'd rather do, but it's really hard, and it's
Mm.
really hard to make a living solely off this.
Mhm.
Like, and if you can do anything else that's like more stable, that you like, that you can enjoy, or you can
Yeah.
enjoy your life and do a job that you're just kind of lukewarm on, like maybe do that. If
Sure.
I was in law school before I switched over to film, and there have been years where I'm like, man, I should have stayed in law school, but
Sure.
I don't regret it. But
Right.
like, if there's anything else like
Mhm,
more stable outside of entertainment that you enjoy doing, that you could
mhm,
find joy in, like do that. I'll say one last thing about it. There's a filmmaker that I know. I'm not going to give his name, but
mhm.
he has a day job and he's worked a really nice, lucrative day job for his entire life. And he takes like a week or 2 weeks off, like every year, and makes a movie.
Oh,
You know what I
nice.
mean?
Yeah,
And he
yeah.
self-finances it, and his movies are actually gotten to the point now where I think over the last year, like, he's close to being able to quit that job, like his
Mm,
life job.
yeah,
But I'm saying, like, movies are not super expensive to make now. You can, and there's nothing wrong with doing it as a hobby. Like,
right.
there is
Mhm,
nothing wrong with that.
mhm.
Like, and you can still put it out to the public just like the pros do. So, like, there's no reason to, like, go all in on it if you're not like, be 100% about it if you're gonna go
Sure,
all in.
sure. Well, excellent advice, sir, and, this was a lot of fun, and, yeah, I hope we can have you back, when your, A Hard Place comes out. I'd love to talk to you more about that because
Yeah, that'd be great.
that sounds interesting. So there you have it, folks. Check out Craving and, Jay Horton's all his stuff. We'll put links down in the description of this, video. So thank you very much.